I had the idea for Yoba Development in 2017. So I knew I wanted to start my own company. 2018, I was shooting a show called God Friended Me, where I was playing a real estate developer of affordable housing.
Hello, and welcome to Mornings with Joel, commercial real estate podcast, where we focus on rising stars and established players in commercial real estate and talk to them about how they are building legacies in today's marketplace. Well, hey, we'd like to welcome all to the Mornings with Joel CRE podcast. We are very, very excited to be back live today, and we have a special guest that we brought on, Dr. Malik Yoba. What's up, dog? How you doing, man?
Good morning, man. Good morning. How are you? Oh, it's afternoon, but it's all good. Nobody's
There you
counting.
go. There you go. I'm a little loud, so forgive me. So, but trying to wake things up here. But man, it's good to have you here. And it's amazing. In preparing for our call here, didn't realize that we were 2 months apart in birth. We both grew up and were raised in Harlem. We both eat a plant-based diet. I mean, it just goes on and on. So it's kind of amazing that we haven't bumped into each other before now. Well, we met before now, but you know what I mean. When we were much younger, we haven't run into each other. So,
Mhm.
but it's good to see you, man. Happy to have you on the
Man,
show.
thanks for the invite, bro.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, for y'all who may not know, and I doubt any of y'all don't know, but Malik Yoba was the star of the show New York Undercover, Detective J.C. Williams. You might remember that. And Malik, one thing that I actually forgot was that you were on Why Did I Get Married 1 and 2. I forgot all about that.
Man, don't you come on here without you don't be telling them people that you ain't really, anyway, go ahead. I'm gonna let that slide, you
That's
know.
the slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
don't know how you could forget such iconic performances, but
there,
that's okay.
there you go. Iconic performances. There you
Yeah.
go. There you go.
Look
And
at look at you can line up a bunch of actors that I love, and if you ask me to like quote every movie and every movie that I couldn't do it either. So
okay, all right. Well, I know some of them were iconic because I'm looking over your left shoulder there, and I see that image award from the W. Oh,
yeah.
there's a few of them sitting up in there. All right, all right. So good stuff, man. So I gotta ask, like you said, I mentioned we kind of cut from the same cloth here. You know what it was like growing up in those days, and a lot of times it seemed like the only way really out of the rough environment was either drugs or sports. And you wound up going into arts. So how did that happen? Just a little background on that before we get into the real estate stuff. I mean, how'd you wind up doing acting?
Um, so just being exposed to it by my parents,
Okay.
my parents were cultured Negroes, as it were. So even though we lived in Harlem, we went to the theater, we saw concerts, went to art galleries, went to museums. My mother in particular was really, really big on that. So
Mhm.
early exposure to theater, live theater. Didn't go to a lot of movies and didn't have a TV in the house.
Wow.
My father refused to put a TV in the house, but it was really through theater, like
Yeah.
seeing Alice in Wonderland on stage when I was 4 years old. That
Okay.
made me say whatever that is that those people are doing up there. I want to do that. So, and then of course you had performing arts, drama programs in school, elementary, junior high school, music programs, all those things that have been removed from a lot of the schools. We had those as kids.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, but I was exposed to everything. Played sports, was in the theater. Yeah, wanted to do it all. Like every kid, played basketball, thought I'd be in the NBA, baseball, MLB,
Yeah.
football. I played hockey. I was a
Okay.
BMX kid. I did it all. In fact, my very first development project I tried to do when I was 17, I tried to get a BMX track built in Central Park, and I met with the Parks Department. They had plans, knew how much acreage I needed, how much money I needed. Uh, I didn't know it was called development. I just knew that there was no place for kids to ride their bikes.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
from we couldn't have one with all this land in Central Park. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's true. That's true. I mean, I used to ride down the Central Park and just try to do the loop. I mean, there's a long loop from 110th Street to 57th Street or 59th
Well,
Street.
especially because on 110th Street, you got to start on the hill, Snake Hill.
That's right. That's right.
So you
Snake
come
Hill.
in the park or the 110th Street, you're
That's right.
first, you going uphill the whole time.
That's right. You wore out by the time you get to 106th Street. So
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. So that was crazy. But yeah, that would have been pretty impressive, and I'm sure would have got a lot of use back at that time. So you know, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, 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 no. It's just it's crazy because I ended up building a makeshift track in what's now called Pelham Fritz Park in
Okay.
Morningside Park. So
Mhm.
right there in I mean not Morningside. What's that? Not Morningside Park. What's the park where they do Shakespeare in Harlem? Classical Theater Harlem. Uh,
Uh, it's not Morningside.
uh,
Um, I
what is
can't
that?
remember.
Mount Morris Park.
More. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Down there with
So
Congress.
here's a crazy story though. So the person that I met with for the Parks Department, his name is Pelham Fritz. Was
Okay.
Pelham Fritz. Trinidadian cat who was a friend of my mother's. And I'm 17 years old and I go have a meeting with him and I have all my, ideas for this park and how come we can't, have this in in Central Park. And he indulges me, lets me do my pitch, only to tell me at the end, nah, it's never gonna happen. Like, yo, you got 444 acres in Central Park. What do you mean it can't happen? Um, sorry, I'm getting one sec.
Mhm.
Sorry. Um, um, and so it tells me, obviously it can't happen in the park. And I hear about this trail in Mount Morris Park. So kids like, there's like a little situation with some jumps in the park in Mount Morris Park. And so I explore, I ride my bike up to 120th Street, Fifth Avenue, going to the park. There's no jumps. It's like a little path in the dirt, in the grass, right? That's half growing. So I decide that I'm going to use this and make some jumps and turn into like a little track.
Mhm.
So I'm out there with a little Savarin coffee can and a stick, and I'm digging in the dirt, filling the can up, making little jumps.
Yeah.
So kids start showing up, and I tell a kid like, "Yo, you go get a shovel, you go get a bucket, you find some old tires so we could line up
Mhm.
the track."
Yeah.
And we straight up out here digging up dirt in New York City Park anyway, right? And so the one of the park workers comes with a pickup truck and he stops. Hey, what are you kids doing?
Yeah.
All the kids are about to run. I'm like, no, don't run. And I said, do you know who Pelham Fritz is?
Mhm.
He says, no. I said, that's your boss. He said we could do this. So the guy goes into the building in the park, talks to somebody, comes back out and gives us the thumbs up and
Really.
allows these kids to dig up the dirt in the park and make jumps. Now I'm lying my ass off, of course. Years later, Pelham Fritz passes away.
Mhm.
That building in Mount Morris Park was named after him. So all I know is I invoked that man's name on the hallowed grounds of my bootleg BMX track in Mount Morris Park, and the building was named after him years later. So,
Wow.
fun fact.
The Morning for Joe CRE podcast is sponsored by ImpactMask.com. That's M as in Mary, ImpactMask.com. The world's most breathable mask that has 99% efficacy, which is higher than an N95 mask, and it won't fog your glasses. Check out the science behind these incredible masks at ImpactMask.com.
How about that? How about that? So you got your footprint all over the city, man. Look at that.
Yep. So,
Yeah. I still got to get back at you about being there at the Ritz-Carlton in New Orleans and you telling me the streets that the New York Undercover was not filmed on. I'm like, dude, I lived up there. What you talking about? So, I didn't realize you lived in the same neighborhood, so of course you would know as well.
yeah.
Uh,
So it all looked the same. It was all burnt out at the time.
Yeah, you were embarrassing me in front of folks from LA. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna get him back. So all good, man, all good. So acting was a big thing. You kind of learned that as a kid by being out with your parents. You know, you mentioned about your dad, and that just kind of made me think that that would have really been, you know, I don't know if he's still alive today, but if he would see what kids are seeing and have exposure to with social media, I'm sure he would be having a fit with all of that today because it's a whole nother world back from what it was back then. You know, back in those days, there were what, like 5 channels that would go
Three.
on at
I
midnight?
mean,
Yeah, yeah,
NBC, CBS, ABC. That was
yeah,
it. And
yeah,
13.
yeah,
PBS.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, how do you think he would respond to all this social media today? And you
Well,
know,
my father always said the masses are asses.
okay,
And he never wanted us to follow what everybody else is doing. So this idea that people have followers would have probably, been lost on him. But I'm not sure. I mean, I think on one level, he would probably embrace the opportunity to have your own platform and do your own thing because he always preached build your own generator so when they turn off the power, you still have lights. So that was a value and ethos is family. Like this is what you do. You don't sit around and wait for opportunity. You create your own opportunities. And so he was an entrepreneur, he was a hustler. He had like 15 different hustles. So, although he had to have a steady job
mhm.
working in the hospital, he was a jazz musician who wasn't able to fully actualize his dream as a full-time profession to take care of his family. He had side hustles,
Yeah,
so he was always like, black man gotta hustle, black man gotta hustle. So you're raised with this in your head all the time. So this work ethic, always talked about taking care of community. He was a union delegate. His union, 1199, was the sponsor of 1199 Plaza. So they
okay,
were the lead developer where we grew up.
yeah,
So we lived in, was born in the Bronx, raised in, Harlem. But by the time we moved into those buildings in 1974, and they opened in 75, we were actually the first family to move in there. Um, he was very, very proud because it was his union that built that place. And
hmm,
so he had the inside track, not just on the building, but also what the 20-year plan is he would always talk about for Harlem.
yeah,
So he was tapped into, you know, everything that was happening on 125th Street, as one of the sort of first phase when, Mart went 125 went up and Harlem USA went up. He was always talking about how the city would be transformed, Harlem specifically, and how Black folks would be displaced. And so it was important for us to sort of be involved. So I think that he would probably have said, embrace the technology, tell your own stories, create your own thing.
okay, all right. Well, that's insightful. Yeah, so he would have embraced it, but just made sure the focus was right.
Yeah,
So
yeah, 1000%.
yeah, yeah, real good point. Real good point. So, all right, well, sounds good. Sounds good. Just wanted to ask you one other thing before, like I said, we start pivoting to real estate. What else you got going on the acting front? You got anything else that you're working on there, or uh,
Um, acting, there's a series coming out called The Kings of Joburg that I shot in Cape Town. That'll be on Netflix later this year.
Mhm.
There's a couple things I've been producing, working on a travel show. I've been more in producer mode.
Okay,
And when it makes sense, if it's not too much of a time commitment away from what I'm building with Yoba Development.
Mhm.
Um, and also we have a federal contracting company as well, Yoba Global Solutions, that started with some siblings and a cousin and a friend we grew up with. That's like my adopted sister. Um, so I've been really, really focused in business, which is why we saw each other in New Orleans,
yeah,
the Black Executive Leadership Council or conference, a summit, I guess it was called Black
yeah,
Executive Leadership Summit.
something
But
like
no,
that.
I've been heavy, 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 in my father's words about building your own generator. And especially since COVID and the two strikes, where, saw a statistic last week says something like 39% of acting and writing jobs is down. Writing and acting jobs are down 39% year over year,
Really,
which is insane. So, and I've never been a fan of waiting for someone else to tell me when I could work. So when it works and you're getting offers and you're doing your thing, but you know, um, I'm too entrepreneurial to sit and that's just kind of overtaken my life as well, you
Yeah.
know. So here we are.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Good point. Cape Town is one of my favorite places on earth, so I look forward to seeing that when that comes out. Yeah, that's going to be pretty nice. So looking forward to that. Yeah. Sure, y'all feeling what's that market down there? YK Market or something like that on the what is it? Can't remember right now.
In
KY
Cape Town,
Market. Yeah,
the outdoor market,
yeah, yeah. The outdoor market down there on the waterfront. KY Market, K something like
in Cape Town.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Where the main, with the yeah, I can't.
Everybody.
Yeah,
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 you know what I'm talking about. I forgot
yeah.
KY Market, something like that it's called, but I don't know. Anyway, looking forward to that. That wasn't part of the script, obviously. So I didn't have all my facts on that. But beautiful place down there. So
Mhm.
look forward to checking that out. Cape Town got a lot going on. But all right, well let's pause for a second for a word from our sponsor, and then we'll jump right back into the show with Malik Yoba on the Mornings with Joel CRE podcast. All right, welcome back. So again, this is Joel Miller. Happy to have you guys with us on the Mornings with Joel CRE podcast. Our special guest today, Malik Yoba. And Malik, appreciate all the information on your background and your experience growing up in the city and whatnot. Obviously, we have that similar background from that standpoint. But what's interesting is that you pivoted toward real estate. And I guess one question that I would want to ask is why real estate? Of all the things that you had in front of you, all your awards and everything else behind you, you've obviously been successful as an actor and in the arts. Why real estate?
Well, like I said, man, I mean, being raised in Harlem, being raised in an environment that my father owned, and had a co or shares in the co-op. Um, that's a lot of it. We grew up when Harlem was burnt out, right? And so for me, um, so my father always talked about ownership. My mother was a big fan of architecture and design.
Okay.
And so I grew up with those magazines around the house. So I grew up with a deep appreciation of architecture and
Hmm.
interior design just from her and her eye. And, I've had a number of properties that she's was the person that designed them. And so I kind of picked up a lot of that from her as well. But so it started as a kid. Like I told you, I tried to do my first development deal at 17. I didn't know it was called development. I just knew I wanted to build something.
Right.
And I also didn't understand why we had to live with like burnt out buildings around us.
Hmm.
So it was more of a childhood question around why does it look like this where we live? And I go downtown where I went to school and it didn't look like that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand redlining. I didn't understand, any of the sort of political workings that didn't allow for investment to come to our communities. Even though my father would talk about it, I didn't really get it.
Yeah.
But it was that. And so I bought my first place in my 20s on the
Hmm.
Upper West Side of Manhattan. And when I sold it, I almost made almost $1 million in profit. It's
Wow.
from my very first real estate transaction. So that had a lot to do with it. Like, yo, this was kind of crazy. And then I always wanted to get into development once I realized what it was called. I've always loved construction. To this day, I could stand by a construction site and just watch workers like put buildings up, which I'm still fascinated by to this day.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of things. It wasn't just one thing. I've had my hand in a lot of different businesses, marketing to hospitality to obviously things in media, fashion, technology. So I've been always been entrepreneurial. But the real estate piece for me um, was always part of the plan. And, you know, some brothers gave me my first seat at the table, a brother named Dan Bythewood,
Hmm.
Cité, who's also in New Orleans. I don't know if you know Dan, but New York based.
Hmm.
And, when Dan was, working on putting together the project in Baltimore Center West, invited me to have a seat at the table. And so having a chance to learn about development from the ground up, starting in about 2007, 2008, um, I just became more and more fascinated by the process, whether it was meeting with the city, meeting with architectural firms, engineering, construction companies, um, obviously designers, finance. So I got more and more exposure to how this happens. And then the part of my role was always going to be to sort of be a mouthpiece for the project.
Right.
The other thing is I used to look at Magic
Mhm.
Johnson, and I loved how he leveraged, his celebrity and his career into business. And, we all looked at him opening up the theater on 125th Street, or I'm in Brooklyn,
Mhm.
One Hanson Place here, his first condos in the old Williamsburg Bank building. Um, and so it's a combination of things that made me want to get into it. And I just got pulled further and further in. And then in 2017, I had this, well, 2018, I had the idea for Yoba Development in 2017. Um, so I knew I wanted to start my own company. And in 2018, I was shooting a show called God Friended Me, where I was playing a real estate developer of affordable housing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so oftentimes art imitates life.
Yeah.
And I'm reading the script, and the character's saying a lot of the things I say in real life, the importance of having a seat at the table, um, how we got to work together as community and all the things and own. And I literally pushed my computer away from me and said, really, God, I see you. Like, this is this is crazy that you know uh like, and it happened. You mentioned why they get married. Like that happened during that movie too. I was going through a divorce, and
Okay.
things that happened in the movie that kind of was mirroring my real life, and so that happens, quite a bit. And so in this particular case, we're shooting in downtown Brooklyn, and we're on set one day, and we're on a construction site.
Mhm.
It's cameras, and I'm looking like, yo, this is crazy because we had started building in Baltimore at
Okay.
that point. And I'd be visiting the construction site in Baltimore, and I'm on set here in Brooklyn, and it just felt like my life was kind of merging my worlds. And then a few days later, we're shooting at the Brooklyn Navy Yard at the Steiner Studios,
Okay.
and across the street, a friend of mine, Scott Reckler of RXR Realty, is developing the entire block.
Mhm.
And I was thinking about people from the projects down the block and said, how many people from the projects walk by film sets and construction sites and have no idea about either space? I'm in both spaces.
Mhm.
I want to find a way to bring real estate filmmaking and young people together. So I have a history of education from the 80s, working in arts programs and how we use music and dance and theater to engage community. And so it was really a combination of all that, all those experiences that said, you know what, I want to find a way, like I said, to bring three of my passions: deeply passionate about education and working in community and working with young people, deeply passionate about filmmaking, and honestly, more so as a director. As
Okay.
much as I love acting, I love storytelling on film and how the power of camera and motion and music and editing and location, all those things, how they work together to tell powerful stories. Um, and so that was initially the idea, and that became something called I Build New York, which is a program that we started through Yoba Development. And so the way I set Yoba Development up was at the intersection of real estate, education, and media. So with the belief that we are builders of people, places, and things in that order. So how we use film, how we use education to drive engagement so
Mhm.
that communities just don't feel put upon. And like here they come building some we can't afford. But if we educate while we're pursuing deals,
Mhm.
then some other thing can happen. And that's kind of what has happened. And so I ended up taking that idea, which was coined by a woman named Leslie Ann Dunn, who's my chief of staff. And she wasn't at the time,
Mhm.
but when she shared that idea, I build New York, I'd never heard those three words together like that. And I was like,
Mhm.
yo, that's fly. I build New
Right.
York.
Yeah.
And then, so I took that to my friend Scott, and I said, hey, man, I want to figure out a way to bring more black and brown people into this game beyond construction workers or maybe a broker,
Mm.
right? Or agent. And he's like, well, we do too. We got these big projects coming up, like in New Rochelle, and we'd like to hire local people. And, how about, he's like, I'll fund it. And so when he said that, initially I was thinking doing some kind of summer program for high school kids. I decided that I was going to shoot a documentary about
Really?
my journey pursuing my first deal in New York. And that's now called the Real Estate Mixtape. And I knew that I didn't want to make it for television, for streamers, or for network because I already understand how folks think in that world. I'm not going to try to convince you of the value of the story I have to tell. What I knew is that I can shoot this thing and screen it myself in a very grassroots way. So to date, I've been 51 cities or something in 6 countries, screening it around the world. That has opened up tremendous opportunity around the planet, around the country, at real estate conferences, at colleges and community. Um, and we've been able to create our own little sort of ecosystem.
Mm.
So run school-based programs, partnerships with Department of Education, with Pratt, with Johannesburg School of Architecture, FAMU. Um, I'm all over, like I mentioned. And that leads to deal flow. So if I'm in St. Louis or, Little Rock or Chicago, or you get to see where the bodies are.
Yeah.
You get to have partnerships. And so it's been a really, really interesting journey. It's just kind of, that's why I say it's kind of taken over. Um, and Yeah, so we do. So our big thing we do as a company is we have something called Flipping the Hood, which
Okay.
is basically, it, you know, it's more than a business conference, but
Mhm.
it happens May 9th and 10th here in 2025 at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is crazy because it's all come full circle. Our first pilot program, Viability New York, took place at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where I was shooting initially.
Mhm.
There's a high school there called the Brooklyn Steam Center, and we ran the pilot, and kids ended up with internships and jobs. And now one kid in particular is full-time employee working in facilities management
Okay.
at the JP Morgan headquarters. He's in the union. He's now, making good money as a 19-year-old, changed his boy's life. Other young people who were like in the dock became agents and, moved out of New York. And so going to school now. One's working at the Obama Foundation now, which I take no credit for. But we do know that between the young people that were part of the dock or the young people that have been part of our school-based programs, it's transformed their lives. And so, um, yeah, man, it's created. Um, so I honestly feel like it chose me more than I chose it.
Yeah. It's a good way to look at it, and this is really at the heart and soul of why I wanted to bring you on as well, because we started this whole show basically with the mindset of trying to help the generation behind us. How can we get with them early so that they don't have to go through trying to figure this out for 20 to 30 years and then start making money in real estate, right? Why can't we start them off at 18, 19, 20 and get them going early, Because this stuff isn't taught in high school.
Exactly.
And so, you mentioned quite a few things here because I wanted to talk about that even in light of what you mentioned about having a seat at the table. There's a lot of big deals that go on that historically, minorities have just been shut out of. It's like, well, you go figure it out on your own. And no, we're not giving you a seat at the table. That's kind of broken a little bit. Obviously, there's a big thing going on with DEI right now. I'm not even going to get into all that. But the importance of that so that you can see how people, I'll give you an example. You look for an example let's take the JP Morgan building that's going up right now in Manhattan, right? That building costs over $1 billion. I guarantee you there's people that think that Chase wrote a check for $1 billion and then the building went up, right? But they don't understand how you raise debt, how you raise equity, how you put this together to get these deals done, even if you're not a bank.
Yeah.
How do you do that? And young people need to learn that early in order to get that exposure, so that they can get in the game and start flipping the hood and doing these other things that you were
Yeah.
talking about. So yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you sharing that. So
And young is, young in age and young in experience,
yeah,
so, at our activations, we have people from high school kids up till literally people, I think the oldest person that showed up was like in their 70s.
wow.
You know what I mean? Because people want to know. They don't know.
Yeah,
They could have
yeah.
lived their whole life here. They just see buildings go up. I live in downtown Brooklyn. I sat with the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership in
Mhm.
2007, and they said in the next 5 years, $9 billion of investment is coming. Not many people in Brooklyn knew that. I'm
Yeah,
walking around here with this information, and I would point it out to people. I'd say, "You see this? You see this? Like all this, I knew was happening, before it happened, but there wasn't much I could do with that information at the time.
yeah,
My mindset wasn't even where it is now. I just knew that coach put me in, like, how can I get in? I want to invest in something. I want to be a part of it. And those opportunities honestly weren't always made for me. If it wasn't for Dan Bythewood and Ian Arias, his partner, who for years, those are the dudes, like, we'd be on, it could be a capital call, we'd be on with the city, I'd be in the city meeting with the, you know, land use or some local city council person. And I didn't know a debt equity, I didn't know a
yeah,
capital stack, I didn't know none of that shit. Basis points. I was
yeah,
like, yo, what is that? Explain it again. No, no, no. Say it again. Explain
yeah,
it again. What should I read? Oh, Investopedia? Okay, go in there. Like it was, so for me, it was really like this sort of hodgepodge, you
yeah.
know. And only recently, like Cornell has this certificate program in real estate development, which I was supposed to start in February. I've just
Okay.
been crazy, but just to get some more formal education. But at the end of the day, between reading books, between Google and God, between being in the room, asking the questions, as you know, it's not like earth, fucking rocket science,
Yeah, yeah, it's not.
and this stuff. It really isn't.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I've just, become more and more passionate about it because it's not just the sticks and the bricks.
Mhm.
It's how do you build community,
Yeah,
right? And community should be inclusive of everyone. And
right.
everybody's going to have a different thing that they could bring to the table. Um, and what celebrity does and my recognition is it opens up a lot of doors. And
Mhm.
I've become a credible messenger.
Yeah,
Like I said, I'm like very Johnny Appleseed, you know, you know, city by city, state by state, country by country,
mhm.
building a global network, which
Yeah,
I've done. And so now there's a whole media company I'm standing up to that aggregating all this activity and created on ramps for investment. So we'll talk about that when we launch it officially at another time. But that's coming online in 2025, which I'm really, really excited about because it just furthers my approach, in this space. And everyone, like I said, has a value and bring what is unique to you to this space, whatever that may be, you know.
yeah.
Um, so
No, it sounds good, man. It sounds good. So we obviously gotta keep up the fight. And you talk about the transformation of Brooklyn. I actually graduated Brooklyn Tech.
of
So
course you did.
yeah, I'm an alum, man. So, you can imagine what downtown Brooklyn looked like back in those days and what it looks like today.
Yeah,
It's like mind-boggling,
yeah,
after all that. And I could see that $9 billion of growth. I would have never imagined the Barclays Center there and all that other stuff. It was downtown and Junior's Cheesecake, and that's about it.
exactly. Somehow they held on. They did not. I think they might have sold air rights if they had them, probably to
Yeah,
one of the buildings across the street or something.
probably
But
so.
now they holding on. That's like everything else is going up around it. which I can appreciate that.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
ah,
exactly, exactly.
we're gonna hold this.
Yeah, those were crazy times though, man. You know, you had so many housing projects around there too, and everything else going on, Fort Greene and all that. So, you know, it was quite a period of time, but that transformation is a part of it. You know, you always got to step back and think though, how many minority firms have had participation in those deals in the redevelopment of downtown Brooklyn or other parts of the city and other parts of the country, you know? So it's the you know, statistic that minorities in commercial real estate still represent like 3%, you know, and it's you know, but with 16% of the population, so it would be nice if that number grew. And you know, we
Well,
have.
the thing that has to also grow is capacity, and you hear it from both sides,
Mhm,
right? So you will hear a prime, one of the big boys say, "Man, listen, the system's broken. Why are you forcing me to do 30% set aside for minority vendors on this project?" And so there's that argument, and many of us could say, "Well, people are qualified. They just need, hey, coach, put me in." Then, like I had dinner last week with a friend who works for a major construction company. And they're building stadiums around the country. And part of her job is the community engagement piece, making sure that we have that participation. She wanted to pull her hair out and she ain't got much, right? Uh, because we didn't show up capable.
mhm,
So she's like, you're at the community board meetings, you're fighting for your participation. And when the rubber hits the road and you get that subcontracting contract, can
mhm,
you really deliver? And so there's that too. And in all of this work, whether you're talking about getting more capable firms to do the work, particularly in certain markets,
yeah,
right, that may not be as sophisticated or as many opportunity. Um, you also have to deal with the trauma of the lack of experience and the
mhm,
lack of exposure and opportunity.
yeah,
And this work, um, for me, is deeply spiritual.
mhm,
It's not just about the business, right? Because we can't expect people to behave and perform at a level if they don't have the training,
mhm,
right? And so that's a big part of how we approach. So, like when we do our activation, right, it's part church, it's part wellness retreat, it's part business conference, it's part theater, it's part school.
okay,
Because we got to approach it from the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and financial realities of what we bring into a space. So, for instance, when we did it last time, we had 150 students from students in temporary housing,
mhm,
right? How do you talk to a kid that is housing insecure about development,
yeah,
about
big
like
disconnect, yeah,
huge disconnect,
so
unless you
far
one
apart.
acknowledge like I see you,
Mhm,
I know where you are, so let me provide, here's a meditation practice, here's a mindfulness practice, so that regardless of your circumstance, you develop the ability to envision the life that you want. How does it look? What does it feel like? Right? Because that's part of it.
yeah,
Nothing happens without the thought first.
you can't envision it, yeah,
And not just envision it, see it and feel it
mhm,
and believe it. Because if you are, so man, look, we grew up in communities where people, man, you ain't never gonna do that shit, man. Man, you don't know nobody. Like we hear that all
yeah,
the time. And people start saying that to themselves. Or you finally build the thing, and in the community you've built in, like Baltimore,
mhm,
West Baltimore, which had experienced urban blight for decades, then people might want to deface your property and break in, and you know
mhm,
so I think that for developers of color, particularly when we want to develop in communities where we're from that have not had development, you're going to get it from the systems in place to keep you out, whether
mhm,
it's banks, whether it's people at the state legislative level, or the bureaucrats that are saying, you know what, I know you're owed these tax credits, but we're just not going to give it to you. Like the construction companies, insurance companies, like I've seen a lot. and I've been involved with a lot, which could make most people head spin, or you go, well, this is too much. Why am I even doing this? It's like this, I can make money doing something else.
Right.
Um, but for me, if it isn't work that you feel called to do, um, and I don't do anything that I don't feel called to do, whether it's acting, whether it's music, any of it. I feel an urging that like you have to do this. This isn't like a nice to kind of do it, you
Mhm.
know. And it's been deep because at this stage in my life, given who I've been in Hollywood and what I've done, and that tension between, you know, portrayal of characters or being the character, being the person,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So that moment when I played that character on God Friended Me, where like that was probably one of the most aligned roles I've ever done. And it wasn't like a big, you know, didn't get a lot of notoriety. A lot of people didn't even know I did that show.
Yeah.
But that was the one where it was a trip where it's like, yo, this is crazy. Like I'm literally on a construction site and hear film cameras.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've written a series actually set in the world of New York City real estate, which, you know, eventually will make it to our screens. And that to me is like one of those things that I'm that deeply align all of the aspects of me. Um,
Yeah.
the doc series I made, I didn't make it for streaming or for television. I made it strictly for grassroots distribution, although it's shot in a very cinematic way, aesthetically and all that. But I also didn't want to have to deal, like I said, with networks telling me the value of what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. A valid point. You know, what I want to do is I'll get with you offline, but I would like to put a link on our site related to the grassroots mixtape that you mentioned. That sounds very powerful, and that really aligns with what we're trying to do is continue to educate. And the one thing though that I will say, and like you said, minority firms have to show up. I completely get that. But there are, and you know this because we're in the same circles. There are a lot of really good firms that are out there that are delivering and that are getting it done. And but so often out here in the world, you hear the term of, well, yeah, we were going to do this with a minority firm. We were going to bring them in, but we can't find any that are
Mhm.
capable of doing the work. We can't find any. And part of getting the word out is to let people know that, hey, those firms do exist. They are out there that have tremendous track records. And so the excuse of, well, we can't deploy this money because we can't find nobody really doesn't carry any weight. So, but that just goes with time.
But it doesn't, right? The woman that I'm telling you about is a black woman
Yeah, a
who,
lot of people get
you know, and she's like, yo, I, you know, and it's crazy because I just sent you, I text you the sponsorship deck for our
that. Okay.
activation so you have more context on what's happening with that. But, you know, there's a mindfulness session we have called Trust, Trauma, and Transparency. And she was sharing her frustration and she's traumatized because she's like, I'm going to bat for our people and they're not delivering. Like, what the fuck? You making me look crazy because I'm fighting for you, and then you show up and you know you ain't dotting your I's and crossing your T's. And we know that version of who we are too, who still will want to pass. I'm like, yo, but come on, man,
Yeah,
you
hook
know,
me up. Yeah, yeah.
hook me up. It's like,
Sister.
no, you gotta show up at a level. So it's tough. It really is tough. So I think both things are true at the same time. There are those that are qualified, and a lot of the primes just don't have the relationships, right? So part of what we believe in is create the space for those relationships to be formed and invite people into that space.
Yeah, I think that's good, man. So, definitely keep doing that. And, before we wrap up, I did want to ask you and let you talk a little bit about your projects. I know you're working on some things. Anything you want to share related to that at this point?
So as you know, man, so in terms of pursuit of deals, I mean, this stuff, as you know, stuff falls apart. You take it to a certain point, you work on it for 2 years and
Nothing.
financing doesn't come through, this happens, you know, so there's that. One thing I am proud of though, working on a redevelopment of a building here in Brooklyn, in
Okay.
Crown Heights, a small project, but the woman who owns it, she came to our first activation. She had just inherited the building from her father, was a
Mhm.
Haitian immigrant, and it was a four family, and she didn't know what to do with it. And she's like, I'm not a landlord. What do I do? I had two commercial tenants. And so initially I tried to connect her with some other contractors who could do the work for her. Ultimately, she really wanted my team and my partners to work on it. So we're working on that.
Okay.
Um, and expanding, maximizing FAR on that, turn into four, seven family. But what I love about that is that she came to the activation in need of help, and we were able to deliver that for her.
Yeah.
So that's a great sort of case study. Um, but no, there's some exciting things happening. I mean, working on a fund right now, particularly for pre-development for a lot of Black developers, as you know.
Yeah, that's needed.
That's seriously needed. And so, again, because of all this work I've been doing nationally, meeting people who are like, hey, we got this money, we're trying to put it somewhere, and we like what you're doing. And so, what that tells me, man, there's something that Scott would always say, Malik, stay hungry and humble.
Hmm.
And I like to think that that's how I remain. I'm definitely hungry. Um, I could do none of what I'm doing without partnerships, without people who know more than me and have been in it longer. But one thing that I do have the ability to do is attract like-minded people who are skilled out in their areas of expertise. And as you know, development is really about that,
Yeah.
being able to make sure you can put the right team together to execute on the thing. You don't have to know everything.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have a working knowledge of things. And, as you know, you ask 10 developers, what does the developer do? You're going to 10 different answers depending on how they come into it. But
Right.
can you get it done? And so that's a small project. There's some other things that we're partnered on, some RFPs that have, one case, won and lost um, on the same RFP. Um, But man, I'm still just getting in where I fit in.
Yeah. Keep swinging the bat, man.
Yeah,
Keep swinging the
yeah.
bat.
So
Yeah.
there's that, and what else? Yeah, man. Some acquisitions we're trying to go after, and you know how it goes, man. You just
Yeah.
keep, yeah. So for us, as long as we stay in our lane, build our people, places, and things, and how we look at development. Like I said, not just the sticks and the bricks, but really from a community standpoint. Education is a huge, huge part of that. And as Scott also said to me, and we had lunch recently, I said, I don't think you realize this shit when you said to me, because what he said was, Malik, you don't want to get into development. It's too capital intensive. Now, this is a man, you mentioned the JP Morgan building.
Yeah.
He spent $1 billion on a project before he even had site control.
That's risky. Put
Worked
it
out.
out. Really.
Spent 600 million on another project. But when you're playing at that level,
Yeah.
that's the cost of doing business,
Right.
right? And he goes, yeah, yeah, there was a real number and this was the project, and they got it. And this is why he said you don't want to do that. But he's working at that level. Now,
Yeah.
since COVID, he's been expanding around the country and he's realizing, oh, there are some other markets we could play in where the barrier to entry isn't as high as New York with the bureaucracy and regulations and
Mm-hmm.
everything else. Um, but no, that's a real number. But the thing he said was, but there's huge opportunities in education,
Mm-hmm.
and it's what you're doing with your podcast and why you're doing it,
Yeah.
why we're doing the things we're doing, and it's true
Mm-hmm.
because the reality is there's still not enough of us in these spaces, and the majority of us simply don't know how
Yeah.
to be in these spaces. So
Yeah.
I think that the more people are educated, the more we have participation,
Mhm.
the more we can have ownership of our communities and our kids, and so that they don't grow up with the same realities we had.
Yeah. Yeah. And begging other people for money. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
comes down to it. Yeah.
yeah.
So final words for our youth and the next generation coming up. What would you tell a 20, 25 year old that's really trying to get in this game? What should be their mindset going forward to have that kind of success you're talking about?
Well, with God and Chat GPT and Google, there's nothing you can't find out. So
Yeah.
any question you have,
Hmm.
you literally are at an advantage because there's a resource somewhere for you to get it. Um, um, One of my favorite books is The Birth of a Building. Have you read that?
No, actually, I haven't.
The Birth of a Building. Yeah, it's a real easy read on development, like soup to nuts, what you need to know, how the process goes. And so for someone who's just trying to figure out like this world, that's a great place to start. Um, and I would say follow Yoba Development on Instagram. I would say follow me. Um, and listen to your podcast.
There you go. There you go. I was waiting on that.
And listen to your podcast. And just set the intention
Mhm.
and move in the direction of the thing you want. And they can always reach out to us because and depending on where they are, we could potentially plug them into other opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's all about who you know in this world, and especially when it comes to real estate. So you're very well connected, and I think as you continue to go along, those dots are going to connect more and more for you to accomplish the things you want to accomplish in the space. So good stuff, man. Good stuff. So it's been great having you here
Thank
today,
you.
and certainly appreciate it. I know we got started a little late, and we all got a lot to do today, but appreciate you carving out some time for us.
So thank you for the invitation. And
Yeah,
look at what I sent you, and let's wrap because you should definitely be in the mix with
yeah, yeah.
stuff
And I
we're doing.
apologize for last time you were down here. I didn't get a chance to catch up with you, but it was kind of last minute. But we'll do it again if you're in town, or if I'm up that way, I'll holler at you. So
So you're based where?
I'm in Atlanta.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So I'll be yeah, because we actually started this podcast called Think Real Estate. And so I got to get back down there to do some episodes as well. So I
Okay.
don't think we can have too many.
Yeah, there
Uh,
you go. There's no
we,
competition,
yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So are you spending any time at the Rice Center at all?
Not much. I've had obviously I know the Russell.
Rome, the Russell family, yeah.
I know all them, and oh man, what's the guy's name that was running
Jay,
yeah, Jay
Jay
Bailey.
Bailey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So me and Jay Bailey keep in touch. But yeah, haven't been down there trying to get some other folks more involved down there, and yeah, I need to get over there. The truth be told. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, and if you're in town and you're headed over there, then definitely give me a holler. I'll run over there with you.
Yeah, yeah, no, they're doing great stuff there.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
absolutely,
good to talk to you, brother. Thank you for the time and invitation.
absolutely,
See,
absolutely.
there's something in the chat. Was that something I should be looking at?
Let me look here.
Oh, no, no.
Yeah, nothing there. But all right, well, sounds good, man. So look, we appreciate it, and to all of our guests, we thank you for being here on the